Hey everyone, in this video I'll be showing you an Arcane Archer fighter multi-class with the Assassin rogue in Baldur's Gate 3. This multi-class build is actually quite strong. I typically like to take fighters up to level 11, but there's actually some merit in taking in a few levels of the rogue. This was a requested build, I played around with it, and it's actually quite strong. The best part is the fighter comes online very early because there's a lot of great bows in Act 1. You can get like the bow of the Banshee, you get Herald and many other heavy crossbows that we can choose from. And there's also the Titan string bow with the Club of Hill Giant Strength, which is just your best option in most cases. Now, another thing I want to mention is Second Wind is really good because you can get an amulet from Kaga, which lets you get poison damage on your attacks, and you can proc that really easily. Now, for our fighting style, we're going to be Archer focused, so +2 to range weapon attacks is just the best choice here. I like defense, so if you don't like that choice, you can go with that as well. Now, we do need some intelligence for this build. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. And a stat spread of 16 Dex and Constitution, 14 Intelligence, and 12 Wisdom, I think works best here because we can use the Club of Hill Giant Strength in our offhand. We're not going to be doing melee attacks much. That'll boost up our strength to make sure that we can do a lot of damage. Dexterity, because we want to go first in combat. We have Banishing Arrows, and if we can get a couple of those off on key targets, we can just dominate combat. I like to have high Constitution as well because this obviously keeps us alive. And Intelligence is used for our spell save DC on the arrow attacks. You could swap Constitution and Intelligence around, and then 12 points of Wisdom just for the saves. And the outfit mod I'm using for appearance is the CL Lore Craft Crypt Ransacker by Copperleaves here, but I'll be showing you actual base game equipment for the people that are wondering about the outfit. Level 2 gives us Action Surge, you guys already know, that's crazy spike to our damage. And then level 3, this is when we can take the Arcane Archer. This gives us cantrips. Light can be nice because this can set up certain gear for your other teammates, and Guidance is good. You want to have at least somebody on your team with Guidance. For the arcane shots, #1 selection is Banishing Arrow. This can potentially banish a target, which is actually insane, and it scales well into the end game. This is going to be your most used arrow in most situations. Now, if you have the bow of the Banshee, I want to mention Piercing Arrow, because this will actually proc the bow of the Banshee to apply to multiple enemies at a time, which will frighten targets, giving them disadvantage on attack rolls, and then they can't move. It's nice, but I also like to go with the Seeking Arrow here, just giving you an automatic shot that will hit, and possibly inflict Fairy Fire, and the Fairy Fire is based off of our Intelligence modifier. Bursting Arrow is also kind of nice. It gives us some AoE. We only have a couple options outside of Arrow of Many Targets, which is likely your best area of effect option. This is nice though. If there's multiple enemies grouped up, you have Cull the Weak, you can just pop a lot of them and get them off the battlefield. I also like Shadow Arrow though. It applies blinding on an enemy, which is super useful in the early game, and Psychic Damage is nice too. So we'll go with these three here: Guaranteed Damage, the Blind, and then also the Banish. But Banishing Arrows typically are going to be your #1 option. Level 4 gives us our first feat. At this point, Alert is always a good choice, and Ability Score Improvement on your stat for attacking. I also like Sharpshooter, however, this gives a -5 to attack rolls. We do have a +3, so this kind of balances it a bit. But this is going to give us +10 damage. These don't work on all of our arrows, but if we're going with a ranged build, this is a good choice to go with. I also like to go with something like the Crossbow Expert here if you want to attack at close range. And furthermore to that, we can actually set up once we get to Act 2 and do some darkness attacks. This is great too because Crossbow Expert at close range is just, it's really impactful once you have Sharpshooter. I like Alert here, but I think that Sharpshooter is our best choice just for the damage. Just want to offer a few other options, as I know a lot of people don't like Sharpshooter. Level 5, the big Power Spike. Extra attack, when we already have Action Surge, it's strong. Level 6 here, this is kind of where we want to switch off and multiclass, because you do get another feat at level 6, which is nice. At this point, you could take the Crossbow Expert, but I think it's valuable to add in the Rogue here. This also gives you skill proficiencies. I would recommend grabbing Stealth and boosting your Stealth all the way up there. And then you can take something like your Acrobatics there. I guess we already have +3. I guess we'll roll with Intimidation. Stealth is just a really important one to have. Make sure that you do select Stealth. Sleight of Hand's great, but there's other ways that we can build around that. We get our bonus action abilities here, which are great. And I like the Rogue Thief multiclass here with an offhand crossbow, but I was requested to do the Assassin, and I actually think there's actually a lot of value here. So with the Assassin, you get Initiative, so the Initiated, advantage on attack rolls against anyone that hasn't taken their turn yet. We also have an attack roll against a surprise creature is a critical hit, and then the Assassin's Alacrity, which gives you your action, your bonus action back at the start of combat. So if you initiate a fight, you're going to be able to just jump right in and continue fighting. If you normally start a fight with an action, you then can't use that action again until the next turn of combat. So this is really nice. Then we can choose, there's a couple really good options here. So we can take the fighter up to level 7, which will give them magical arrows and the ability to use a bonus action to curve a missed shot into hitting a target. However, if we're using most bows, a lot of them are going to already ignore non-magical resistances. So I don't think that's the best option. And while the bonus action attack is nice, we could even just use hand crossbows if it really matters that much. Another option we could go with is to go around here and then take the Warlock. The reason for the Warlock is because at level 2 we can see through magical darkness, which is absolutely really good. There are items, however, like the Eversight Ring that allow you to do this. I just want to mention this here. If you want just a bit of an extra stealth edge, you could do that. Since that level 7 fighter ability is not really that amazing, you do get another feed more health. However, I also want to mention, I was requested to use the Ranger. I just want to mention that the Vengeance Paladin would probably be the best choice for this because they can use Vow of Enmity at level 3, apply it to themselves, get advantage on all their ranged attacks for 10 turns. You're a lot less likely to miss when you got advantage on all your ranged attacks. The Ranger, however, will give us even further burst damage on turn 1 because if we choose the Gloomstalker, that allows us to get a +3 to our initiative as well. We also get an extra attack on the first round of combat. I was requested to do this style build, so I'm going to go with this here. We're going to then take the Bounty Hunter, which isn't going to be a very high chance, but the reason I took my Wisdom a little bit higher, we still have a +1 to Wisdom, and this will give enemies disadvantage on their saving throw. Wasteland Wanderer Fire is really good because fire damage is very commonly, you're going to run into it often. This just protects you quite a bit. The Beast Tamer, however, is another good choice, though, because using this, you can get yourself a Find Familiar without a spell slot, and the Raven is quite nice. I guess I should also mention that you could add in the Barbarian as well, because the Bear Heart will give you immunity to all damage types. I actually like those a little bit more than the Ranger, but the Ranger fits thematically, so we're going to roll with it. And at level 2, we get to take our spells here. So Hunter's Mark's actually really nice because it's a concentration, which we don't have any of, and it's going to give us extra damage. It does use your bonus action, so only use it on a target if you know you're going to hit them multiple times. But it's a good one to have. I also like to have Fog Cloud here, but we can use Arrows of Darkness with a specific item that I talked about if you do want to use the Warlock. Long Strider is a good choice too for the movement speed. And I guess we have the Ensnaring Strikes, we should take that. Now dueling is good, but if you have an offhand crossbow, this is going to be the best choice. 2-weapon fighting will double up the damage there. Defense, however, +1 armor class, good choice if you don't want to use the hand crossbows. There's a few really good weapons for this build, but level 3, this is when we get to take our subclass, the Gloomstalker, which gives us the Dread Ambusher, +3 to initiative, and our movement speed increased by 3 meters, and we also get that extra attack, which also does an additional 1d8 of damage. Meaning we have some pretty good burst damage. We can end combat quickly. And also we get to choose another spell, which we'll go with Long Strider there. It's just the best choice for us. And now we got one more choice for level. So we can go here, get a feat. We can go here and get a feat. It doesn't really matter. Just don't take it from the rogue because you get 1 less point of health. And at this point, I really like Crossbow Expert for the close range attacks. An ability score improvement, however, is still a decent choice. You can put that on your dex or your intelligence. Alert is okay, but not really that great when we already have our Gloomstalker's initiative boost. So yeah, we'll take this to do close range attacks. And we also get the Gaping Wounds for twice as long. But what we want is that we want enemies to come near our darkness, and then we're going to use our crossbow attacks at close range against them. And then we can use things like arrows of many targets, possibly getting ourselves a critical hit, which will crit everybody. One of my favorite parts about gear for this build is there's a lot of amazing bows in Act 1, like Herald, which you can get from the Zentarum hideout. There's also another amazing one from there, the Titan String Bow. As mentioned, use the offhand Club of Hill Giant Strength, and you can get your Strength up to 19. This will deal additional damage equal to your Strength modifier. Arrow of many targets, it goes crazy. The Jolt Shooter, another amazing bow. 2 lightning charges per attack, pretty good stuff. Giant Breaker is also nice because Reeling gives the enemy a -2 to their attack rolls, kind of similar to like Radiating Orbs, and they will stack. There's also the Vicious Short Bow later on, which will give you additional 7 points damage on crits. I also like to use the Hellfire Hand Crossbow and the Nair Mister together. Honestly though, getting Baned for 2 turns is such a good weapon attack, so I like this one. The Bow of the Banshee is another good choice too. Now there's actually a lot of good items here. 2 I want to address, Darkness and the ability to see within it. I mentioned that there's the Warlock you could dip into. The Eversight Ring, which we can get in Act 2, works as well. There's also the Steel Watcher helmet, which lets you see in darkness, magical, which is amazing. And then there's also the Shar Spear of the Knight. So if you go with the evil playthrough, you can get a bit more of a, you get more options basically. But I like to use the Eversight Ring here and leave our helmet open for the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. There is another option that we do have though. Because the Hat of the Storm Science power, whenever the wearer deals thunder damage, they gain Arcane Acuity. If you use the Drake Throat Glaive and apply thunder damage onto your bow, and you do that by holding out your bow, I'll show it in a second, this item here, Drake Throat Glaive, we can actually get the same effect as Helmet of Arcane Acuity. So if you already have this on your Bard, you can use both items here and they'll work. But I'm going to throw this one on this build, just for simplicity's sake. Cloak Protection is great, although you could go with the Deathstalker Mantle, or even the Shadeslayer Cloak if you want to attack from hiding. Now for armor, I think that the best choice is the Ballast Armor, with the Crossbow Expert allowing you to do close range attacks, and this applying vulnerability to piercing damage at close range. and then sharpshooter plus 10 damage, which turns to plus 20 damage. This is just the best armor slot, but you could even use the armor persistence if you went with a good aligned playthrough. You're more defensive that way. There's also the armor of agility, which will give us a pretty high armor class, because right now we have 22. This will take it up to 25 there, but I just think that the ballast armor is such a big boost for damage. I also have the Crater Flesh gloves here, because this gives additional damage, 1d6 of force damage. I should also mention, actually, early game options for armor. The Adamantine Scale Mail is just your best selection. There's 2 different types of these. Use them. They're good. I also want to mention Heldas gloves are kind of fun, and the Dark Justiciar gauntlets for additional damage. If you use Arrow of Many Targets, or the shot that gives you the multiple hits there, you can get some extra damage off on those, which is nice. But my absolute favorite is to use the Winter's Clutches here. When the wearer deals cold damage, you can apply 2 turns of Encrust with Frost. Now, the reason I'm going to be using this is that we can also use the Snowburst Ring. I love this combination. I've used it in so many builds because it's just ice making people slip and fall. Hilarious. And they end their turn. It's so overpowered. But if you want to be strong, we got Darkness we can use. We got Banishing Arrows, and we now have Ice on our side. You don't have to use this, but this will actually debuff the enemies really well. And to prevent us from slipping, Helldusk Boots. This is a late game item. So if you're in the early game, Disintegrating Nightwalkers. There's also Minthara's Boots, which are kind of funny because if you hold a concentration on Hunter's Mark, they'll work. So you can take the Boots of Striding from Minthara. There's also the Boots of Stormy Clamor if you wanted to, because we can apply conditions with Herald. So that's another good choice. But I like the Helldusk Boots. Hellcrawler is also a nice, basically free teleport that we can use too. So if you don't want to use the Eversight Ring and the Snowburst Ring, you could go with something like the Ring of Free Action there, just so we don't end up slipping or getting hit by difficult terrain. There's also the Ring of Protection there. And the amulet I mentioned, Kaga's amulet, the Brood Mother's Revenge, is pretty useful too. The Strange Conduit Ring when concentrating on a spell, so we can use Hunter's Mark and get additional 1d4 of psychic damage. I also really like the Shadow Cloak Ring for additional 1d4 of damage when we're lightly or heavily obscured, which we will be often. Amulet of Greater Health just ends up being the best choice. Perioptic Wound Closure, you can have your teammates throw health potions at you often, is nice because we do have a bit of a lower armor class than normal. The Amulet of Ball later on in the game is nice because you can apply bleeding when we use an Arrow of Many Targets on pretty much everyone. And yeah, there's a lot of other good options, but for this build, we're just going to go with the Amulet of Protection, or the Amulet of Greater Health. For our main weapon, Knife of the Undermountain King is great because this gives us an increased critical hit chance, and the Shadow Blade ability will, oddly enough, work on our bow too from time to time. It's not 100% perfect, but it can possibly give us that. And then we also have Viconia's Walking Fortress. You can use really any shield. There's one that gives a +3 to initiative, the Sentinel Shield. That works well too. And what we got to do is, for the Drakethroat Glaive, take your character here. You can drop the weapon, but you can also toggle it so that you bring out your bow, make sure that it's on your back. You can also do this by holding out and pretending to attack. And then you're going to come to the person that has the Draconic Elemental Weapon. They're going to use the cold version of that. They'll apply it onto your bow, and then now, every time you do a ranged attack, you do a 1d4 of cold damage, and you create surfaces below the enemy. Another thing, there's sneak attacks. You can turn those on as a reaction if you wanted to. Now there's another fun combination. So the Ring of Shadows with Pass Without Trace gives a +10 to stealth checks. Now this can actually be pretty powerful if you combine it with something like a Scroll of Greater Invisibility. And this, you can have someone else hold a concentration for you, and you'll turn invisible with a crazy boost to yourself. So you can apply the Pass Without Trace, and then throw on that there, and then you're now invisible. Which means we can be kind of silly and take an Arrow of Darkness and close range attack someone with advantage here. And I might have a mod that unfortunately makes it so I can use these arrows. There's a lot of issues. I've had to reinstall my game a few times. Yeah, this really sucks because I can't fully show off how crazy this build actually is. Alright, so basically I just use someone else to shoot an arrow there. But what we can do is we can go up right close here, and since we got advantage on the attack there, we're just going to make this attack. But since we have greater invisibility, we roll the stealth again. We just enter combat there. The stealth was successful, so they have no idea where we are currently. Now the stealth check you can change or check at any time. The difficulty class right there, 15, and it's going to increase by 1. We rolled a 41 on our first roll, just for an example. So yeah, we're likely going to be stuck in this for quite some time. Now we also get those Arcane Acuity stacks every time we attack, but if we had the Arrow of Many Targets, this would have been much better. And for some reason our Arrow of Darkness here kind of disappeared, so that's one thing. But we keep getting our actions back, so we can do sneak attacks, you name it. I would recommend doing bow attacks, but we can re-roll our attack rolls there, as you see, and just continually keep attacking. I don't want this target here. It's going to be a big pain. Unfortunately, you can only see the attack roll, and that's a 98% hit chance. So we banished that target. Perfect. I didn't want them there, and it's funny because when you banish someone and freeze them, they turn into that ice sculpture themselves. It's kind of silly, but we also have our extra Dread Ambusher attack here, so use this to secure a kill on a target. I would actually recommend walking up a little bit closer to them. because then the Ballast Armor is going to apply its effects. I would love, again, to be able to use the Arrow of Many Targets here, because this would allow me to chain this around and hit multiple enemies at a time. But yeah, we have to do it the manual, boring way, unfortunately, because mods sometimes do cause issues. But my typical recommendation is to keep attacking the same target, because you're going to apply the Encrusted with Frost after multiple hits and then potentially freeze them. And then we also got our Action Surge here. Oddly enough, yeah, don't know what's going on with this, but yeah, we'll just have to use our normal attacks. I wish I had the special arrows, because those really do buff things up. But yeah, Action Surge. We typically want to attack each target as much as possible, just so we or each target that's on the battlefield, so we set up this ice around them. That's kind of our whole purpose, is that we can crowd control the enemies, because this is just enough ice for them to slip and fall on. So yeah, we got ice around every target now, and we're still invisible. Make sure that you stay close enough to the person that has passed without a trace, so that you are all going to be protected by that. That target's banished, and then we're going to see one slipped and fell, another slipped and fell, third slipped and fell. Yeah, no one had a turn, and we're back here, still invisible with no one knowing what we're doing. It's pretty crazy. They think that we're right over there by the invisibility. So yeah, bunch of enemies that just slipped and fell down. We don't even need to use our special arrows here, but sneak attacks, since we're invisible, are kind of funny, because yeah, we do a ton of damage, and then we're further setting up more slippery surfaces for them to deal with. So you do have to wait till the banished target does come back. That's one downside to it, so just something to keep in mind. But the best part is you're going to stay stealth throughout this, so you don't really have to worry too much. And then we also just don't slip on ice, so yeah, you can just start picking away at the targets here. This may mind break me. Unfortunately, I got way too close and broke concentration. Otherwise, we would have just ended combat right there. But even with that, it's funny. They only took 2 damage there, so they're actually, from the banishing arrow, they actually made off really well. Unless, I guess they might have got healed there. But yeah, we got our sneak attack, so we can do a close range. Typically, a close range sneak attack is going to be better. We can't get that off unless we have a teammate nearby. I'm not going to use a banishing arrow. I want to hit this target so we can curve a shot around and hit them with our arcane shot. That was enough to take out that target and also leave a nice surface. And then I'll just do a close range bow attack. Not a high hit chance, but yeah, we don't really need a super high one. I guess we can do the offhanded. Yeah, we're not going to take them out. Oh, I actually got the flourish sneak attack. So that's one funny thing about flourishes on like that weapon there, is they can actually proc the sneak attack. And that was just enough to bonus action take them out. Perfect. So yeah, as long as you can sneak and get off a sneak attack just like that. Very powerful. If I didn't get mind broken there, I would have just stayed invisible the entire time. And furthermore to that, if you do break your invisibility, drop down darkness, you can see in it. You also make the enemy slip and fall. This is one of the most powerful builds in Baldur's Gate 3. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, hit the subscribe button below if you enjoyed, and we'll catch you all in the next one.